The dawn mist hung low over Silver Lake, wrapping the pines in a ghostly veil, the kind of quiet that feels like the world's waiting for a storm. I was stacking firewood behind my cabin when the growl of bulldozers shattered the peace. At first, I thought it was a lost rig, but then I saw them concrete footers sinking into my land, not 50 feet from the porch my grandfather built. A smug HOA suit in a neon vest waved at me, like I was the one out of place on my own damn property. My pulse pounded, but I wasn't alone. My cousin Nate unzipped his duffel, pulling out the rifle he'd kept since his army days, his eyes cold and steady. My sister Ellie had her phone out, recording every trespassing second, while Uncle Frank, leaning on his cane, wore his old sheriff's revolver like a warning shot. The HOA crew laughed as we marched up the hill until they saw Nate's barrel. Then they ran, hard hats bouncing, clipboards skidding into the mud, one guy tripping face first into wet cement. As the dust settled, a single question burned in the mountain air. Why the hell were they building on my land? I'm Robert Kane, 61, retired forest ranger, father of two, and the owner of a 3-acre slice of heaven on Silver Lake, Montana, handed down from my grandfather. That cabin wasn't just a building, it was where my kids caught their first fish, where we split logs under crimson fall skies, where we rode out Christmas blizzards. It was home, free from HOAs, zoning boards, or nosy neighbors measuring grass blades. Out here, the lake and the trees were our only laws. Until last year, when a developer named Ethan Caldwell slithered into town. It started quiet, like a spark before a wildfire. Ethan, all polished loafers and fake charm, hit the general store, buying coffee and pitching his company, Crestview Ventures, and their plan for a gated lakeside community called Pine Haven Estates. He'd bought up old farmland 5 miles east, promising a fancy HOA with a clubhouse and exclusive shoreline amenities. I didn't Karimi deed was rock solid, my land untouchable. But then I noticed the woods thinning on the ridge, and neon survey flags popped up near my fence like a bad omen. 2 weeks later, I came back from a supply run to find a cement truck squatting on my property, rebar laid out for a dock frame right by my porch. They'd even moved my firewood to mark their site. I charged over, demanding, "Who gave you permission?" The crew boss, a cocky kid barely out of college, smirked. "Pine Haven HOA, sir. This land's zoned for community use. You're in Sector 8. Sector 8? I jabbed a finger at the cedar sign my daughter carved at 11, reading Kane Cabin, 1957. "This is my land. Leave now." They muttered into a radio and kept working. I gave them 24 hours to clear out or face their sheriff. At the county office, things got uglier. A zoning map, filed 2 months back, marked my lakefront in blue labeled HOA Community Access. The clerk shrugged. "Says you signed off last April, Mr. Kane." She showed me a forged email and a scrawled signature that wasn't mine. This wasn't a mix-up, it was theft, dressed up in bureaucracy and sealed with a liar's grin. I called Nate, who roared up from Idaho in his beat-up Chevy, toolbox clanging, his old military grit back in full force. "You want to try talking first?" he asked, tapping his duffel. "Evidence first, then we hit hard," I said. We set up trail cams, flew drones, and recorded every trespassing step. Ellie, who'd worked in real estate, dug into records and found a cesspool of fraud. Ethan's HOA was targeting lakefront owners, forging lot lines, bribing surveyors, sneaking amendments into zoning files. Most victims were elderly or part-time residents who didn't check their mail. It was a land grab in broad daylight. Nate said it plain, "No more waiting for judges. We stopped this now." We hit the work site at dawn. Uncle Frank, 84 and sharp as a blade, wore his old deputy hat, his Colt glinting. Ellie live-streamed on her phone. Nate checked the wind like he was back in combat. The workers sneered until Nate chambered a round, then they bolted, one slipping into a cement puddle, another dropping his laptop in the dirt. Ethan wasn't there, but his sleek SUV rolled up with 2 deputies. He stepped out, clipboard in hand, flashing a smile sharp as a knife. "Mr. Kane, vacate the property now." Uncle Frank's voice cut through like thunder. "Son, this ain't your land, and I've got the badge to prove it." I held up our 1957 deed, county seal gleaming. Ellie handed the deputies a folder, forged emails, a dead surveyor's signature, proof of Ethan's scam. His hands shook, his smile cracked. The deputies ordered his crew to halt and leave. Ethan didn't back down. He filed an injunction, claiming we'd threatened his workers with guns, and tried to redraw our boundaries permanently with a communal reassessment notice. Ellie spent days in the county archives, uncovering Ethan's racket. He sat on the zoning board, greenlighting his own land grabs. For other families, like widow Agnes Miller and veteran Tom Reed, faced fake easements and eviction threats for non-compliant docks. We launched Save Silver Lake online, posting drone footage, forged signatures, and Uncle Frank's video on property rights. It exploded hundreds of thousands of views, complaints flooding the county, reporters calling. Ethan's press conference, blaming fringe locals, got shredded online. Building on private land is a misunderstanding. Hope that lake's cold when you're in cuffs. Then it got dirty. Someone torched our fishing dock. I woke to smoke and embers where my grandfather's hands had worked. Days later, our cabin was trashed. Me father's rifles, my wife's locket, a photo of my grandfather smashed. I knew Ethan was behind it, a desperate man striking back. Then Ellie found a forged deed transfer to sell our cabin to a shell buyer, using a fake power of attorney. We raced 60 miles to Larchfield Title Trust to stop the deal. Ellie had tipped them off, and we stormed in with our deed, signature proof, and fraud evidence. The notary froze the sale. The buyer, a suit in fancy shoes, stormed out, cursing us for ruining his deal. But there was no time to breathe. Agnes called, voice shaking. Ethan's men were at her cottage, one possibly armed. We tore to her lakeside home, finding 3 goons on her porch, one looming aggressively by her dock. Nate's high beams and horns scattered them. I ripped the keys from their excavator. The sheriff showed up, and we learned Ethan was draining HOA funds, his lawyer gone. But he wasn't done. A fake foreclosure notice hit, claiming I owed on a non-existent loan. At the zoning board hearing, packed with residents and cameras, I laid out Ethan's crimes: forged documents, a dead surveyor's signature, stolen land. Tom Reed played a recorded confession from Ethan's ex-employee, admitting to the scam. The board chair, Ruth Hammond, halted all HOA work. The crowd roared. We went bigger, sending evidence to the FBI for wire fraud and identity theft. An agent confirmed others had reported Ethan. Days later, an HOA enforcement action notice arrived, but we ignored it. At a lakeside bonfire, neighbors shared stories of Ethan's bullying. We pushed harder: radio, news, our site hitting 300,000 views. Ethan's PR flops drowned in public outrage. At a final hearing, the board voided his claims. Ethan faced charges. The cabin was safe. Sitting with my granddaughter Sophie by the lake, her fishing pole swaying, she asked, "Did you stop the bad man, Grandpa?" I grinned. "We all did, kid." At a Boise conference, I shared our story, sparking hope for others. That night, by the fire with Nate, I looked at the cabin's warm glow. It wasn't just ours, it was a legacy Ethan couldn't steal. Because when greed came for Silver Lake, we didn't just fight. We burned it down with the truth, and it shone brighter than any bulldozer could bury.